Welcome back, ECJ family. I am Chelsea. This is
Malay.
And we're here with the amazing Darryl and Chip. Today, we are going to be talking about healthcare and health disparities, and also health inequality within or in correlation to climate change. We are here at the Environmental Summit.
How'd y'all get here?
I took an Uber.
I drove very quickly.
Okay.
But I obeyed the laws on the
Stay
way.
within the speed limit.
Yes, I did.
Now, how did you get to this point in life?
Thank you for that question. We don't always get asked that. People just make assumptions. And for my journey, it was ingrained in the fabric of my generation in terms of, the kids will do better than their parents. Being in STEM education, you're going to do something that you are passionate about, in which that is a journey in and of itself. My passion at the time was sports, of course, not unlike any other African-American male growing up in Charlotte, North Carolina. But that quickly changed when my grandmother got cancer. And I was a freshman at Johnson C. Smith University. And when we went to talk to the doctors on the weekend in Spartanburg, no one could interface with them in terms of knowing that medical lexicon. And I figured I better learn something about, this field that they call medicine. And so the first step there was biology. And subsequent to that, I changed my major in my sophomore year to biology and chemistry. And that sort of set me off. That was my launching point for the STEM education, an inquiry type of career. And the way that you do that is become a scientist. So all I had to do then was figure out what type of scientist I was going to be. And the rest is sort of history, as my good friend Chip would say.
Well, the way that I got into it was as a little boy, I grew up in the east side of Cleveland. And as you know, Cleveland, Ohio is one of the more segregated cities in our country. But as I would, travel to different parts of the city, I would see these people, these young men and folks who were young, but they just seemed to be so beaten down. They seemed to be older than they actually were. Mm-hmm. And I never could understand how, when I used to ride the bus, I would go to certain parts of the city, and these young men and women just seemed to be so old. And then when I would go on my way home past the more affluent parts of the city, those folks just seemed very youthful. And so growing up, I thought I wanted to be a physician, and so that's what I set my sights on. So when I went to college, I started to major in chemistry and I started to take all of those pre-med requirements. But then I realized that I didn't have a passion for science in that way. So, but I still wanted to actually be involved in trying to improve the health of people. And so as I was in the gap year after I graduated, I was walking past the career planning and placement, and it had something about preventative medicine and public health. And as I began to understand more about it, I was like, that's it. This is a way, because I still was interested in sciences, I just didn't want to treat people individually as a physician. And I started to realize that I could have more of an impact on the lives of people who were otherwise marginalized through public health than I could as a physician.
And if I could just add on to that a little bit, so the passion for environmental justice, that was, as Chip indicated, and I was thinking about this as you said that was ingrained in me as a kid because my mom and dad were civil rights leaders in Charlotte, right? And civil rights, environmental justice is sort of one of those tentacles that emerges from the civil rights diaspora, right? And so, that's where that passion came from, right? That coupled with the need to know how your grandmother is going home, so to speak, going to heaven, those two together, and then as Chip said, public health was just a catch-all to it. So, being a scientist is one thing, but being an environmental public health neuroscientist, that's a little bit something different. And everyone has to sort of chart their own trail. And you, whatever you do, you must be passionate about it, or else you're not going to enjoy it. And your life isn't going to be happy. You want your life to be happy. So reach for that, find that passion, no matter how long it takes. Always look for that.
Earlier today in your presentation, you mentioned having a mentor. In the area of environmental and climate justice, do you think it's important to have a mentor, or is it not necessarily needed?
I think it's important to have a mentor or mentors in whatever discipline you go into, particularly in environmental justice. Yes, I have several. Yes, Dr. Bullard, of course, first and foremost, and I call it my blue sky team, right? You need someone to encourage you. You need someone to be there for you that will lend you a shoulder to cry on. You also need someone who pushes you forward. You need a protector. So I have about 5 or 6 mentors still living, and more of them have passed on to heaven now. And so no matter what discipline you go into, you're gonna need mentors, as I'm sure Chip will attest to.
Yes, I totally agree. It's interesting because when it comes to environmental justice, my mentor was actually not one of the professors, but one of the people that I met in the School of Public Health, Sonny Ray K. Deary, who has since passed. And the reason why I mention him is because he worked in the admissions office at the School of Public Health at Tulane University. And he was a mentor because he lived in a community in New Orleans that actually had an incinerator or waste facility right in the middle of an impoverished black neighborhood. And as a young public health student, one of the things that he did is he actually was concerned because in this community, they actually had this facility and it was a green liquid spilling out of drums into the curbs in this community, which of course, when it rains, it gets into the groundwater and soil. And he was so undone by that he went and got some of my friends who were in the School of Public Health, and we actually were on the news protesting about why this was such a hazard to the community. And this was a guy who had no formal public health training, but he was a person that taught all of us public health students the meaning of activism and how we could use our education to actually be able to challenge those environmental injustices in community. So he was a mentor, and if it wasn't for him, I don't think that I would be doing what I'm doing today.
Is the research you guys conduct only based on African American communities?
No, primarily African American communities, because those are the communities that are most adversely impacted. Just look at the recent train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio. They're, right up the street there. Well, that wasn't an African American community. It was a community that was disproportionately impacted by that derailment and the compounds that, leaked from those cars, of course, to burn as well. So that qualified that community as an environmental justice community. So, but yes, I work predominantly in African American neighborhoods.
And for
across
me,
the United States, yeah.
Yes, and for me, it just happens to come out that way. When I do health equity work, the question really becomes, we start talking about health equity. It means creating the conditions where everyone, no matter who you are, race, religion, sexual orientation, everyone has the same opportunity to achieve the best health possible. However, you can't really talk about health equity, which is not race specific. But when you begin to talk about health equity and you begin to start using data to understand who is disproportionately impacted by many of these issues, they oftentimes tends to be people of color. Now, not always, because some of the worst inequities that we see, a lot of them are in Appalachia, which is predominantly white. And so But in terms of the research that we do, when you begin to start asking the question, as I did this morning in the summit, where can I find these health conditions that are simultaneously at their worst levels in the same neighborhoods? And then you begin to do a demographic analysis. They tend to be overwhelmingly represented by people of color. And it's an important distinction, because when we do a lot of our analysis, we don't go back and say, hey, let's find out where the African Americans and Latinos and the Asian community are really doing poorly. Right. We don't do that. We say who is doing the worst, and then we see who's there. And they tend to actually, and a lot of times, to be overwhelmingly people of color.
So how are you able to connect that health inequity back to climate change or the justice of environment?
Mm-hmm. So those are called adverse outcome pathways. That's why it takes so many years for you to learn biology and then the chemistry, and then, of course, in graduate school, you learn about all of the different models for how a particular chemical that's perhaps coming from a smokestack of an industry located nearby, how is that chemical dispersed, and how does it then impact those communities, in terms of the modality, the matrix of, air, water, soil. And so it takes a multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary approach to be able to connect any type of exposure back to where it came from, and then how does that lead to a disease? Well, we know most of the adverse outcome pathways, that's a discipline called toxicology, right? And so but in many instances, we don't and we cannot connect it to a specific pathway. As I was saying this morning, causality is very difficult to demonstrate, but causal inference, associations, links is getting you on your way to that, right? If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it probably is what?
A duck.
Okay.
Darryl is exactly right. And as I mentioned earlier in the presentation this morning, when Wanda Dillard asked me to come and speak, I said, I can't do this without Dr. Darryl Hood. And that's because health inequities and environmental justice are just two sides of the same coin. And so when we begin to start thinking about how do we approach this problem, you can't really talk about health disparity and not see some type of environmental injustice there. They're just very connected. And as you continue to do this work, the more you start thinking about the health of people, you begin to start understanding or uncovering things that you don't know. So for example, I can determine, or I have measurements of who has a particular poor health outcome. I can actually even connect those to the social determinants. But even as of all the things that I know how to do, I can't do it by myself. I need people who understand different disciplines. So that's why I will go to a Dr. Hood. That's why I will go to a Jason Reese. That's why I'll go, for example, to the Ohio Commission on Minority Health with Angela Cornelius Dawson, because you begin to realize is that the more you start to address the problem, the more that you need to know. And that there are other people who know things, more things than you do, and by coming together, you can address the issue comprehensively.
During the summit, you talked about an app you guys had, which was Simple AQ. Am I correct? Can you tell us a little bit about Simple AQ and what it does and why it's important?
Right. Sorry, and Chip reminded me to bring one of the air monitors, but I left it in my office, so I apologize. Simple AQ is a platform for enabling citizen scientists to be able to basically quantify and know what they're being exposed to at home. Now, every compound isn't in the library, or we don't have a sensor for every compound in our monitors, but it's the criteria air pollutants. That would be NOx, right? Nitrogen oxides, sulfur oxides, okay? Ozone, carbon monoxide, right? PM 2.5, Yeah, just to name a few, but the 6 cryogenic air pollutants are there. But we added volatile organic compounds. We have a sensor on there for VOCs, which is novel and new. And so when people know what they are exposed to, then they have power. You are empowering people. And just imagine if enough people come into my study, then we'll have these sensors all over, primarily those census tracts that Chip pointed out this morning, okay? And then we'll be able to better understand and model the impacts from these compounds, right? From these chemical stressors in these communities, and that will help us understand those adverse outcome pathways for chronic disease A, B, C, D, and E down the line. So it's empowering individuals. We have them out in Westville right now. You saw that number. I think we're up to 9 out there now. There's an asphalt plant there, okay? And so those individuals want to know, what does that smell at night? All types of questions. What are we being exposed to? You actually know. And then from that and the data, you can take it to whom?
Yes.
Policymakers, yes. We can take that downtown to the city council. We'll have to act when this becomes citizen-driven, right? The power is in the people.
And you guys talk so much about diversity and inclusion, as in gender, race, everything like that. But how do you plan to target the youth? How do you plan to target the next generation? And how do you almost make us more aware of what's going on? I know you have apps in place, but how do you plan to directly target maybe the middle schoolers or the high schoolers?
So it's interesting that you say that, because part of what that means is being able to go into elementary schools, to middle schools, to actually be able to let the youth understand exactly what's possible through the work that we do. Just a little story. And I'll just brag on this. Darryl and I, we are both dads, and we have daughters who are anxious to continue their education. But my daughter had decided to pursue a graduate degree in public health. And I didn't know this, but I just found out that when I was reading her admission statement, the reason why she chose public health is because I went to her school on career day in the 4th grade, and I talked about public health, and that sparked her interest. And so I didn't realize the influence that I had. But more importantly, I have to tell you that when I went to that school and I was talking to the students about health equity and about food deserts, and some of the most intelligent proposed solutions to some of the health inequities and disparities that I ever heard were from 4th grade students. Mm-hmm. And so anytime that we have an opportunity to speak with young people, we do that. We also mentor young students. I know that I had an opportunity to mentor one of Darryl's graduate students, but beyond that, it's just about telling young people 2 things. Number one, we can't count them out. That young people are actually the impetus really for any big social movement. You think about the civil rights, or any movement that actually was designed to actually help people and move the society forward. While the older people had the wisdom, it was the youth that had the energy and the tenacity to do things. And so we take every opportunity that we can to speak to young folks, to participate in wonderful podcasts like these, but also to remind those youth that we come in contact with is that they, number one, have actually more solutions, and they actually have the ability to solve problems. But it's important for them to at least have conversations with those of us who are older so that they won't make the mistakes that we did.
And we have currently 2 active grants. One from the W.K. Kellogg Foundation at Champion Middle, and then one at the King Arts Pre-K Learning Center there in the King Arts Complex from the Links Association. That's a social organization you all may not know about yet. You do? Okay, yes, you will. But Yes, and so those two initiatives led by Karen Patricia Williams, who's not here with us today, in the College of Nursing at the Ohio State University, allow us to interface with the kids at age pre-K, right? You know, that's my thing, now pre-K, and then the parents. See, so you get to the kids through the parents. The parents need to be educated too, but the kids, now I don't have any problem exciting kids your age about our sensors. You all are the impetus behind it because you all know, the gadgets. Parents like myself, I didn't have an iPhone when I was growing up. You all were born with iPhones. Yeah. So, you all are hardwired for this type of thing. So we're depending on you all to, service that little nucleus of energy for the adults at your age, but then we're catching them down here.
Yeah.
That's the only way to do it.
Well, I do applaud you guys' research, and I'm glad that we were able to interview you today.
Yeah, thank you for.
Thank you all for inviting us.
Thank you for inviting us to keep up the great work.
Yes.